Oh, you're welcome once again. Sorry, apologies for that glitch. And you are also welcome. You know you are always greatly welcome. Before oil, before minerals, before even territory, there was something that determined power in the world: infrastructure. Who built the railways? Who controlled the shipping lanes? Who owned the pipelines? That was where power lived. That was before. But today, the infrastructure shaping the future of nations is no longer just physical, it's digital. The cables beneath the ocean, the towers carrying mobile signals, the data centers storing information, the invisible systems powering the internet. And over the last 2 decades, one country has become one of the most powerful builders of that digital infrastructure across Africa. We'll take a break and then I'll be right back. Over the last 2 decades, over the last 2 decades, one country, one country has become one of the most powerful builders of that digital infrastructure across Africa. And that's China, through something known as the Digital Silk Road, the technology arm of the Belt and Road Initiative, fondly called BRI. Now, tonight on the border, we are asking some uncomfortable but necessary question, because this conversation is not just about technology, it is about power. And the question we must confront is this: when the systems carrying a continent's data are built by someone else, who really controls that, the future of that continent? I'm Chioma Lina, and this is the board angle. Let's begin. Let's look at the architecture of Africa's internet, if permit me. I did mention that over the past 2 decades, that's 20 years now, one country, over 20 years, one country has become the single largest builder of Africa's digital backbone: China. Through its, what's it called, DSR, that's Digital Silk Road, Chinese technology companies have financed and built large portions of the continent's technology, telecommunications infrastructure. I beg your pardon. And for those that might not understand, but I'm going to stress it. You know that Digital Silk Road is the technology-focused dimension of China's Belt and Road Initiative, designed to build digital infrastructure, promote technological standards, and expand high-tech industries across developing countries. It aims to create, according to them, a global digital ecosystem with China at its center. Now, according to East Asia Forum, DSR most times is considered a strategy to challenge US technological dominance and strengthen the influence of Chinese technical standards globally. Companies like Huawei and ZTE have constructed much of Africa's internet architecture. But some estimates, Chinese firms, for instance, let's just try to estimate some of these things. Chinese firms built around 70% of Africa's 4G network. 70% of Africa's 4G network. More than half of Africa's wireless telecom infrastructure has been supplied by Chinese companies. Between 2000 to 2020, 2020, China invested over 13, $13.5 billion in Africa's ICT sector. You might ask me to name, just like you know already. Sometimes I need to take pauses because these investments include we have fiber optics backbone, we have national data centers, we have smart city surveillance systems, telecom towers, and broadband networks. I'm going to mention that again. Chinese technology firms such as Huawei and ZTE have helped build large portions of Africa's digital infrastructure. We are talking about, like I mentioned, I'm going to say that again for those that didn't catch. I said it's fiber optic backbones. We have telecom towers. We have national broadband networks. We have government data centers. We have smart city surveillance systems. In fact, some estimates suggest that, like I mentioned before, Chinese firms have built as much as 70% of Africa's 4G network infrastructure. Now, if this is the tone, that is not a small footprint. That is architectural influence. Well, here is where the question begins. Remember, not accusation. We're not making conclusions, just questions. And sometimes questions are the most powerful tools we have. So let me ask you this. And yes, you that is also part of this, I'm asking this. How should we interpret the scale of this involvement? Is this a development partnership? Will you call it a development partnership? Or will you call it an economic opportunity? Or the emergence of a new form of geopolitical influence? Or would it be seen as colonialism? Because infrastructure has never been neutral. Railways weren't neutral. Ports, ports weren't neutral. Mm-mm. No. Oil pipelines weren't neutral. So should we assume that digital infrastructure is different? Is it possible that digital infrastructure is different? Those questions concern me and you, concern everybody. It's not just an African thing. Africa has welcomed Chinese investment for several reasons. The financing is fast. The technology is relatively affordable, unlike what could be gotten elsewhere. Chinese technology are relatively affordable. You know, the deployment is rapid. They have labor. And for many countries trying to close the digital divide, this actually matters. It's not something that it's like a stroll in the park. No, it matters. Millions of people have gained internet access partly because of these investments. Well, here is where the deeper question emerges. If a country builds the physical architecture of the internet, does, does that translate in any way into long-term strategic influence? Because sometimes we are not looking at what's ahead. We're not looking at the future. We're just settling for what is in the now. Does it translate into long-term strategic influence? Not control, influence. Because whoever builds the system understands the system. Whoever designs the network understands the network. And whoever maintains the infrastructure often shaping how it evolves. So the question becomes, when the digital highways of a continent are designed externally, who ultimately shapes the traffic? There is another layer of this conversation, and it is rarely discussed in public debate. Digital infrastructure does not only involve hardware, it also defines technical standards. Standards determine how network communicates, different networks, how they communicate, how software interacts with hardware, how cybersecurity protocols are implemented, how future technologies integrate with existing systems. Some researchers argue that digital Silk Road is not just about building infrastructure. They say it's also about expanding Chinese technological standards across the developing world. And large of that particular world is found in Africa. Now think about that for a moment. Ponder over it. Because standards shape ecosystems, and ecosystems shape power. So here is a question worth asking. If a continent's digital infrastructure is built using specific technological standards, does that influence the future direction of innovation on that particular continent? Now we arrive at what may be the most important issue of all. We've been on this for a while now. Data. We often hear that data is the oil of the 21st century. But here is the uncomfortable reality. Oil flows through pipelines. Data flows through networks. And whoever builds the pipelines influence the flow. So let me ask a difficult question. When a country's telecommunications network, data centers, or surveillance systems are designed and maintained by foreign companies, who ultimately controls the architecture through which national data flows? Who? Is it the government that owns the system, the engineers who design the network, or the companies that maintain the technology? I take that again. Who ultimately controls the architecture through which national data flows? Is it the government that owns the system? Is it the companies that maintain the technology? Or is it the engineers who design the networks? Because control can take many forms. Ownership, access, technical expertise. So the real question may not be who owns the infrastructure. The real question may be who understands it deeply enough to shape it. In several African countries, Chinese built safe city or smart city programs have been implemented. Whether we like it or not, it's happening already and it's happening live. These systems integrate technologies such as we have facial recognition cameras, we have biometric identification databases, because there are more than one. We have automated license plate tracking. We have centralized policy monitoring systems. Supporters argue that these technologies modernize security and help law enforcement respond to crime more efficiently. However, critics will raise a different concern. Mass surveillance, political monitoring, civil liberty risk. So here is the question we must confront as societies. How should governments balance security and freedom in the digital age? Because technology itself isn't neutral. Well, let me rephrase. How should governments balance security and freedom in the digital age? In itself, technology is neutral, but how it is used is not neutral. Let's be fair. I, I like to be fair. Without external investment, Africa's digital infrastructure may have developed slowly. Connectivity gaps may have persisted. Economic opportunities may have delayed. So these investments have created real benefits, which can be questioned. But another question emerges. At what point does partnership become dependency? And how can nations leverage global partnerships without losing long-term technological independence? This is not just Africa's question, it's a global question. But for rapidly developing digital economies, the stakes are particularly high. Particularly high. The decisions being made today about telecommunications networks, data centers, and digital infrastructure will shape the next 30 to 50 years of technological development, artificial intelligence, digital finance, smart transportation, healthcare systems. All of these will depend on the digital architecture being built right now. So the question policymakers actually consider is this: what strategies can ensure that Africa is not only connected to the digital world, but also empowered within it? It's not just about connecting Africa, but also about empowering her. Should countries invest more in local tech ecosystem? Should countries invest more in local tech ecosystem? Should they invest more in regional infrastructure collaborations? Should they invest more in indigenous technological research? Because the future may not belong only to those who use technology. It's not about using it. It may belong to those who design the systems behind it. For centuries, global power, you and I know, has, or let me put it this way, for centuries now, global power has shaped or was shaped by control over railways, shipping routes, energy pipelines. But in the 21st century, the infrastructure that may matter most is invincible. Is invincible. Fiber optic cables, data networks, digital platforms. At this, I want to leave you with this question tonight. I would like to leave you with these questions. In the digital age, does power belong to the people who generate data? Or does it belong to the people who build the systems that carry it? I take that again. Does power belong to people who generate data, or to the people who build the systems that carry data? I'm Chioma Lina, and this has been The Bold Angle. You are welcome, and good night.